We have some big news in the NHL. Rangers defenseman Tony DeAngelo is on waivers. Plus, two NHL players, being Sam Bennett of the Flames and Victor Mete of the Montreal Canadiens, have formally requested a trade. We'll discuss what these deals could mean for those clubs coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. Now, as I mentioned, we have some very interesting news today. Last night on Saturday Headlines, we learned that two players have requested formally an NHL trade, and then we have big news on the waiver wire today. Now, of course, yesterday I failed to mention as well that Ryan Lomberg of the Panthers was actually on waivers. He did, in fact, clear. So that transpired. He can now be assigned to wherever they feel they want him, whether it be the taxi squad or the American Hockey League. And then today we had a fairly substantial name. Tony DeAngelo, defenseman for the New York Rangers, is on waivers. And I know a lot of Rangers fans are pretty much in disbelief here. Now, of course, we know DeAngelo hasn't had a good start to the season. So for that reason, it's not as shocking, but given the fact that he's been a regular NHL player for a few years now, put up a good offensive stat line for the most part, except for this year. It seems to be kind of shocking. Now, I will let you know that there is a lot more to this story than his defensive play. I know DeAngelo gets picked apart a lot for his lack of defensive zone play. Obviously, we know offensively he's way stronger than he is defensively. He's been made to look silly a few times. But based on information that I've been able to gather here, I'm not entirely convinced this is strictly related to his play. I think this is mainly more related to more of an off-ice incident or incidents that could have led to this decision by the New York Rangers. And I think at this point, they'd be quite content if somebody would take DeAngelo and his 2-year contract off their hands. Now, as I reported before, DeAngelo signed a 2-year contract heading into this season. I talked about him as being a very likely trade candidate for the Rangers during the offseason, and I know a lot of people disagreed with me, saying they're not going to trade DeAngelo. And even once he was signed, I mentioned, again, this does not mean that he's not going to be traded or that the Rangers would not like to swing a deal to move him to another club or something to that effect. And this is just another prime example of that. You always have people doubting when I say those things. Look at the Pierre-Luc Dubois situation. I came on here, made a video talking about Dubois likely being a trade candidate. Things were not going well with negotiations, in that there was some rumbling starting to surface that he wanted out, and then he happened to sign a contract later that same day. And many people were commenting saying, oh, he just signed, you're a fool, you don't know what you're talking about. But again, we saw that trade happen, and it happened rather quickly. Things materialized just the way that we expected to. And when you have John Tortorella involved especially, things are not going to remain too quiet. He has a hard time kind of keeping things behind the scenes, in my opinion, at least. Now, this is a different situation with DeAngelo, but still, just because he signed a contract, it doesn't mean that he wasn't a trade candidate. The Rangers have been trying to trade DeAngelo since the offseason, and you got to remember that a asset like a DeAngelo or Dubois, they're much more valuable signed than unsigned, because the team that's making the acquisition, if they're not signed, there's no guarantee they're going to get a contract done. They could end up wasting their time and losing out assets for nothing. But if the player is at least signed, they know they're getting a guy that's going to play. It's much more attractive that way, especially if the contract is deemed to be pretty reasonable. So that's why Dubois signed for what he did. It kind of made it easier on Columbus to find a trading partner for him. Instead of signing an 8-year contract at $8 million, which was rumored, he decided to go with that 2-year, $5 million deal. That's an attractive piece for a lot of teams. Now, in DeAngelo's case, same idea. Although I'm not convinced that the Rangers really wanted to do a long-term deal for him. They are just getting him signed to make it more valuable here. But the issues with DeAngelo have been going on for an extended period of time. Now, if you're not familiar with Tony D and his history, I'll give you a quick rundown. Back when he was playing junior in the Ontario Hockey League back in 2013-14, he ended up being suspended on multiple occasions for a combination of abusive officials or other players. He's was kind of accused of saying some inappropriate things. We'll just leave it at that, as well as not being kind to officials. So he has behavioral problems and some baggage that came with him when he was drafted. He was a first-round pick of the Tampa Bay Lightning. He's already been traded a couple times in his young career, which is also a bit of a red flag. He went from Tampa over to the Arizona Coyotes for a second-round pick. So that early in his career for a first-rounder, not even 2 years out, and without really getting much of a chance to be traded, a lot of it had to do with his off-ice officials. Like even early in his NHL pro career, he ran into some more stuff, and then he was involved in that fairly substantial deal that the Rangers did with the Coyotes, where they traded Derek Stepan and Antti Ranta, and they acquired Tony DeAngelo and a first-round pick, which turned out to be Lias Andersson. So for right now, that pick is not working out overly well on the side of things for the Rangers, because they gave away Lias Andersson for a small price, and now DeAngelo could get claimed on waivers. But looking back at trade trees, sometimes it's fun to see how things progress there. But now we're hearing that essentially DeAngelo's had more stuff happen. If you follow Twitter at all, or if you know Tony D has been a controversial figure on that platform, right at the present time, he's not on there. He deactivated everything. He kind of lost his welcome, you could say, because of his ranting and raving, a lot of political stuff. It just wasn't something that was going over well, and I think the Rangers wanted him to pull off of that platform. Not completely sure on that, though. And then now we're hearing that there was another somewhat bit of an incident. Somebody's reporting, and we'll have to see what comes out later if there's any way to confirm this. Now, some are reporting that there was another incident with a teammate, and we don't know exactly what happened, but then some of the more senior members of the team kind of spoke up and stepped up here. And at this point, they kind of just want him gone. That's kind of what we're hearing. Now, what exactly transpired, we don't know. A lot of that's still private. I know a lot of the players, a lot of the NHL reporters and sources that I reference when I'm making these videos are kind of not saying much right now out of respect for the Rangers organization. So we'll have to wait and see if anything more comes out on that. But at this point, I know a lot of people are going to say it's he's been so bad defensively, they want to get rid of him. I think they'll put up with his play if all the other stuff would go away. And at this point, I think they're just fed up and they want him off the team, is what it sounds like to me. If he does clear, which wouldn't be too shocking, given all the off-ice issues that comes with him, he very well could find himself down in the minors. Like it's hard to say how this is going to go. They could put him on a taxi squad and just kind of let him sit. I don't know what's going to happen here. Will a team put out a claim? I mean, he's a good enough player. It's just you can only tolerate so much other stuff, So I guess we'll see how this goes. We'll know at noon Eastern time tomorrow if Tony DeAngelo has a new home, or if the Rangers are going to have to deal with this internally and assign him elsewhere. Maybe they keep him on the NHL roster and they just consider this message sent and see if things correct. I don't know, but it's a situation that could get messy in New York if he's not claimed. So we'll see what happens and see if there's any more information that comes out about this, and we'll know noon tomorrow if indeed he's going elsewhere. Now, as I mentioned, we confirmed last night on the Hockey Night in Canada broadcast on Sportsnet with Saturday Headlines with Elliot Friedman and Chris Johnston that two NHL players that's been in the rumor mill, mostly one more than the other, have formally requested trades from their organizations, and they're players that we likely should see on the move relatively soon. I mean, depending on how urgent these teams feel these matters are, they may take their time with it, but as we saw with the Columbus situation, they were taking their time and that got ugly really fast. So it just kind of depends on how civil things can remain between the player and the team while they sort everything out. But essentially, Victor Mete of the Montreal Canadiens has formally requested a trade out of Montreal just due to lack of opportunity. He's barely getting any chance to play. I mean, he did play a fair bit going into the bubble in the 2020 playoffs, but he already had a consistent top four that remained into this coming year with Weber and Petrie and Sherratt and Kulak. And then you go in, you add Alexander Romanov, or I guess Romanov as is how he prefers to have it pronounced now, and Joel Edmondson in the mix. That kind of cuts Victor Mete down to being at best a number 7 guy. Even Willette, who was with the team and played a fair bit in the bubble, is even below Mete now. So, there's not a ton of chance there. They still have Cale Fleury as well. They had to put Noah Juleson through waivers, and they lost him. So it's probably a situation where Montreal would probably prefer not to move him because they could need him later on. And I guess if they do drag their feet and Bergevin doesn't swing a deal super fast, then maybe a situation could evolve. Somebody could get hurt. Maybe he'll get a chance to play. Maybe they prolong it. I don't know. But at the end of the day, he feels he deserves more of an opportunity and is not enjoying sitting on the sidelines, which you can completely understand and kind of go from there. I mean, Victor Mete is a 22-year-old defenseman. left shot. He's got parts of 3 NHL seasons under his belt. Never been a strong offensive producer, but I think the potential is there for that to get better. I mean, right now, I think his career high is like 13 points, but I honestly think he could probably be a consistent 30-point producer if he was able to play more minutes and be higher in the lineup. But that's going to take some time. I mean, he's still young though. A lot of defensemen do take a little longer to mature that way, kind of become a little bit more well-rounded in their game. But I've seen enough, especially through his time in junior, Team Canada and all that, that the potential's there. If he can, like I said, get the right coaching, get the right opportunity in the right number of minutes. But hard to say what the career for him ends up being. I think to a degree you could probably be fair to say that Mete was rushed a little bit due to lack of depth a few years ago. Like, Montreal 2, 3, 4 years ago was not nearly the team they are today. They've really added a lot of pieces in the last few years, especially this past offseason. They're really a much deeper team than they ever have been in quite some time. And a lot of these players that are kind of fringe, fourth line player or, barely a number 6, number 7 defenseman, when it comes to guys like Mete or even like a Ryan Poehling, they might feel they're ready for more NHL exposure and opportunity, but they just can't get in the lineup. So it's nothing personal. It's not like anything's really gone horribly wrong between the two sides. It's just he wants to play and he's not getting the chance. So his agent, Darren Ferris, has formally requested a trade with GM Marc Bergevin, and they are going to work on that here in the coming time. Now, of course, when you look at where could Victor Mete go, where might be a good fit, I mean, there's 2 or 3 teams within the Canadian division alone that could use a bit of a help on the blue line. You're looking at teams like Ottawa. I mean, Ottawa, Montreal have swung trades before. Technically, the Senators don't need blue liners like super bad when it comes to being healthy, but their blue line has been absolutely atrocious this year, but they do technically have more than enough defenders right now, so they'd probably have to make a subsequent move to kind of fit him in there. But I think Mete would probably be better than a lot of the guys that they've had playing, especially in the third pair. But, that might be tricky to do because they'd have to move somebody else out to give them a roster spot. You get the team like the Pittsburgh Penguins, who had reportedly shown interest before. And, of course, they got a banged-up blue line now as well. A lot of injuries there. So Pittsburgh could be a potential landing spot for him. You think the Winnipeg Jets in the Canadian division, who've been also looking for blue line help for some time, might be a spot. And even Vancouver, who's ran into a lot of injury issues as well, had reportedly shown interest in the recent weeks too. So there's a number of Canadian spots there that could be good for him, and obviously trading within the division. In the past, it was more something you wouldn't see, but it might be easier because of quarantine rules. So we'll see how that goes. But there's lots of other teams too. There's at least 2 or 3 other teams in the U.S. that you can probably make an argument for. And we'll see what happens with Victor Mete. Now, the other player, as I mentioned, that has requested a trade formally, actually, they do have one thing in common between these two guys, is they share an agent. Darren Ferris is the guy. Of course, he's also a little bit more famous for representing Mitch Marner in that Marner negotiation that was, ended up being quite public not too long ago. But Sam Bennett in Calgary, of course, as we know, back in 2014, was the 4th overall pick, came into the NHL with a lot of potential, very much a highly offensively gifted game from junior, playing in the Western Hockey League, and that just never really materialized at the NHL. He's got parts of 6 seasons now in the NHL. He's 24 years old. His career high is 36 points, which isn't all that bad, but the problem is that came as a rookie. Ever since then, he's kind of dropped in his overall production. Usually 20, 25 points a year has been kind of what he's been averaging. Sam Bennett's kind of carved out more of a grinder slash fighter agitator type of role. He doesn't fight all the time, but he's kind of had to change his identity in his game to get into a consistent spot with Calgary. So he's playing game in and game out. But after all these years not really being able to play a consistent offensive role where he was probably most gifted back 4, 5, 6 years ago, it's just not happening for him in Calgary. They're a team that's deep down the middle where he preferred to play center ice. And he would like a trade as well to get more of an opportunity. He's kind of tired of playing, a lot of fourth line, occasionally third line, and just wants more opportunity, just as simple as that. Now, based on those reports, though, it was reported that Brad Treliving of Calgary didn't seem to be in a huge hurry to really accommodate this trade request between Bennett and Darren Ferris. Of course, like most teams, when they become a deeper team and, they end up getting more skilled players playing in those roles that they would probably would have otherwise. The team doesn't mind it at all. It's good for the team, right? So they might not be in a big rush here, but you just hope that things don't end up like they did with Pierre-Luc Dubois and end up getting messy, that the player, even though they formally requested it, they get frustrated that the team isn't trying to help them after what they've given them in return. And then hopefully things, don't get to the point where they're ugly and kind of contentious, because that could be very public and be a major distraction for the team, like we saw what happened in Columbus. So again, since these trade requests were new and we haven't officially really linked these players to specific teams, I mentioned a few teams I thought might be a good fit for Victor Mete. When it comes to Sam Bennett, I think there's probably a variety of teams out there, but you're probably looking at a team that's probably lower in the standings if you want more of an opportunity. Maybe a team like the Red Wings, for example, they're still trying to find who's going to be their long-term top 6 type of guys. They have a lot of prospects that are going in and out. They've had some injuries, some COVID issues. Like, there's a lot to be figured out there. That's just one example, and there's many others around the league as well. So we'll see where these players end up, and hopefully things get done sooner than later. If you're new to the channel, consider subscribing and turning on your notifications so you don't miss any future content. And give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. I'd appreciate it if you did. As always, thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.